All right. Call to order the Police Accountability Special Meeting Monday, July 24th, 2023. The PAB, this is a public notice. The PAB has resumed in-person meetings and encourages community members to attend in person. Community members attending in person should observe the health and safety protocols for in-person meetings of Berkeley boards and commissions, as outlined by the City of Berkeley. The PAB acknowledges that physical attendance may not be feasible for all community members. To this end, the Office of the Director of Police Accountability has been exploring the option of allowing for remote participation at the PAB meetings. Please note that the ODPA and the PAB are in the early stages of implementing this hybrid meeting format, so there is a possibility for technical glitches and errors. Your patience and understanding are greatly appreciated. To access this meeting remotely, join from a PC, Mac, iPad, iPhone, or Android device using this URL listed below. If you do not wish for your name to appear on the screen, use the drop-down menu and click on Rename to rename yourself to be anonymous. To request to speak, use the raise hand icon on the screen. To join by phone, dial 1-669-900-6833 and enter meeting ID 821-3632-8053. If you wish to comment during the public comment portion of the agenda, press *9 and wait to be recognized. And we are recognizing the land acknowledgement and moving on to the roll call.
Okay, Chair Moore,
I'm here.
Vice Chair Harris is absent at this time. Board Member Calavita.
Here.
Board Member Leftwich.
Here.
And Board Member Wilson.
Here.
Okay, we have a quorum, and just for the record, we have Lieutenant Montgomery joining us today. And at this time, I don't see any members of the City Attorney's Office.
Do you see anybody from the city manager's office or any other staff?
No, currently no other staff are present. Okay.
Which will bring us to our second agenda item, which is the approval of the agenda. Everybody want to take a look? Do we want to move anything around? Is there any issues, questions, or concerns? Not seeing or hearing. Thank you. We'll take care of that. Director, can you put something over between the door to keep it from being locked? And not seeing or hearing any issues with our agenda, we'll move forward to public comment. Public comment at special meetings is limited to the items on the agenda. Speakers are generally allotted up to 3 minutes, but may be allotted less time if there are many speakers.
Okay. With that said, I will start off with those who are physically present. Are there any members of the public that would like to provide public comment? No, okay. Just because we have a couple people trickled in.
Yeah.
Would anybody like to provide public comment from those physically present? Yes. Okay. With that, of course.
It's discussing what happened with the quote independent investigation of racist text messages, and I don't understand how the city manager can take control of processes which are supposed to be independent and fair, and somehow they turn out not to be. So I hope we're pursuing that one. And I'm just eager to hear how you're going to handle the issue of the ALPRs. And one thing I still wonder, if the majority insists that we need them of the city council, do we really have to start right off the bat with 52 when there's questions about how effective they are and whether they do what they're supposed to do? And that's a big investment. I think it's going to end up being a costly move at the expense of other good uses for public safety. So I'll be interested to hear how you all are coming down on that issue. That's it.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public that would like to provide public comment at this time? Okay. With that said, we'll now move on to our virtual attendees. Kit Saginor, you should have permission to speak.
Thank you very much. I just want to speak in praise that you're continuing your investigation into what happened with the bike patrol. In connected to that, I really am very much appreciative of the work that the director and the chair did in putting out that press release, making the point that what was released to the public said that there were no problems in regards to racism and so forth in the department, even though the investigation was this narrow area. It's really impossible to say based on data for this narrow situation, you can make generalizations about the whole department. I think that was a really important point that you made, that you pointing that out. So thank you very much for that. And thank you very much for your continued work.
Thank you. And just refresh and speak. Again, if there are any other additional members of the public attending virtually, now is your time to provide public comment on any matters of the agenda. Chair, at this time, I see no further hands raised.
That will take us to agenda item number 4, which is our planning session, PAB's presentation to Berkeley City Council on automated license plate readers.
Okay. Director, would you like to start? Sorry, one moment. Why? Share the screen.
Okay. Chair Moore, members of the board, as you all know, tomorrow is the presentation of the department of the acquisition for the ALPRs. In preparing for it, we provided the city council the official position of the board. And tomorrow will be the opportunity after the presentation of the council, of the police department, to be able to provide the position of the board. This is a draft PowerPoint that we created based on the latest report that we've given to council, which is also included in the supplemental packet for council. So we just wanted to today give you the opportunity to fine tune it. And also if you can, at this meeting, make a decision about who within the board is going to present the positions of the board tomorrow.
Is there a time limit for our presentation?
I can look into that. Historically, I don't know that it's been capped at a particular.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Again, that said, we could go through the slides,
do
and
that.
if there's anything you would like to add or something you don't see, feel free to let us know so that we can include that. So these are just this is the overview section that we'll be covering, or at least that we, in our initial draft, proposed that we cover. Sorry, let me move this out of the way so that it is clear. Again, we're starting just with stating our stance again, what our research has shown, the concerns regarding the proposed policy specifically, and the recommendations that you all provided. Again, our most recent report focused on these 2 primary questions. It's just an emphasis of the stance that the board has taken. And then this just providing an overview of the factors that influence the board's decision. We narrowed it down to 3 key points just because in terms of communication, it's usually a good way to make sure that the main points get across. Again, we just based on the draft and what we had presented previously, we highlighted the following data points. Again, if there's points that you would like for us to further provide, please let us know and we can do so. And then
Can I ask, what we're talking about are fixed cameras, the Vallejo study, I don't think I've seen this before. It's all on ALPRs attached to vehicles.
So yes,
So is there a study that's focused on the fixed?
There's-
If I'm not mistaken, Vallejo focused on both, right? The mobile ones and the fixed ones. Because the 35% rate, I think, of error rate was for mobile and the 37% was for the
For
fixed
fixed.
ones.
But the 140%.
I'm not sure what that was. Yeah, good point.
we could definitely confirm that. My recollection is that the ALPRs on vehicles was the higher. The 140% was for a comparison between vehicles without ALPRs compared to those with ALPRs. But we'll confirm that and we'll highlight that distinction.
Can I also point out that that one, the rate was high for senior officers, if I remember correctly, on the patrol vehicles,
Mhm.
but less high for less experienced officers. It would be good also to put the date of that study. I don't remember when it was, but it would be good.
Mhm.
And then similarly, like is the report for Mesa, is this fixed or mobile? LPRs?
We'll confirm that. I personally don't remember at this moment. But we'll confirm and make the distinction as well. Okay, any additional comments on this slide before I proceed?
I'm just wondering,
Mhm.
maybe it's too much to provide footnotes, but
Yes.
I personally, if I'm looking to study, always like to see a citation.
Mhm. Okay, so I'm with this long. Again, we'll cite these as well, but these are just two of the other studies that we have cited in our report. Again, we'll take the notes that were mentioned in the previous slide for this one as well, or the comments. And then we're emphasizing the slides that were, or rather the graphs that were provided in the report, just because those did provide important data points for us to emphasize on.
So I think going on, first, I don't think we need to put like continued in patterns of slide,
Mhm.
just a stylistic thing. But then this, I think these slides, other than this Bakersfield item, are research. And I think the other point, including perhaps the Bakersfield point, but certainly the other sides of the graphs, that isn't, I wouldn't call that research per se. It's like data, or specifically the graphs are looking at incidence and clearance rates
Mhm.
as distinct from these studies that are like actually some of them controlled studies.
Mhm.
So I might give it a different heading.
Okay.
Research.
Maybe just findings on the effectiveness.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that will cover everything.
Okay. Okay.
And then again, you could put the references on these graphs
Mhm.
that I sent in. And I
Yes.
don't think anywhere you explain what the red vertical line is. Is it explained on here? That that's when ALPRs, the red vertical line should be labeled.
Okay. And then some of these slides we do plan on breaking up just for presentation purposes, because we acknowledge that they're wordy in their current state. So go ahead and move forward. And then for this point, again, we highlighted some of the primary concerns. These are just summarized versions of what was presented in the report itself. But we're open to the wording and making sure that it properly reflects the board's positions.
Well, I think we need some kind of slide back before we get into this. that summarizes what the key points are regarding the PAB's position on the effectiveness of the technology. I think that is important.
Mhm. Okay.
I also, I don't know, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but do you have anywhere in here in further slides about like the data that was cited in the Taplin referral? Sort of this 800 vehicles stolen here.
In terms of the original reference, this particular PowerPoint focused more on the most recent report that we had published.
Okay,
But if that's something that the board wants to see, we could definitely include that in there.
okay. I don't want to dominate this conversation. I'm just, were you ever able to get our incidence rate for 100,000 to compare to other jurisdictions?
We didn't get the other jurisdictions, but we did perform the calculation. It was just more of a matter of time crunch, but yes, we could add those in there.
Okay,
And I just don't have that number for me.
okay.
Mhm.
Just a procedural question. So the PowerPoint slide, you're imagining presenting the PowerPoint slide to council. And on the agenda, the question arises as to who does a presentation. Now, is that the presentation of the PowerPoint slide, or will you do that, Director? I wasn't clear.
Yeah, that was my ask to you. Do you want to designate somebody from the board to make the presentation? I certainly can be there to support, or I can do the presentation, whatever you prefer. I'm seeking guidance there.
I'm open
Well, I
to the
didn't want to
discussion.
jump, what?
I'm open to the discussion.
I
If
didn't want
somebody
to
else-
jump into the, do we want to finish this? I don't know.
Yeah, why don't we keep going to this and get our head into it? Round out the conversation. Who's that?
So we did dedicate a slide to the alternative section to LPRs. Again, just kind of covering a few of those bullet points in regard to that section that we provided in our report. And then continue to a few of these other slides.
This seems like a lot of slide from surveillance.
Mhm. Here's a few, yeah.
Well.
Yes, we could definitely narrow that down. And then again, we summarize it with the concerns.
I really use the word apprehension, which is has a different connotation than concern.
Okay.
It's throughout the, it's throughout the slide.
You could just say issues.
Okay.
I'm wondering, it seems to me that the section on the acquisition report, I don't think we need a separate section on the acquisition report and the proposed policies. Like, if there's a way that we can condense this a little bit. I think that some of the same issues were raised with regard to both the acquisition report and the proposed policies, like, for example, the lack of clarity or accuracy or specificity.
Mhm.
And I would combine those because there's only so much patience.
Okay, and then
And I'm wondering if we could also talk about this in terms of the complexity of concerns regarding the acquisition. I don't know if we could include not just that the issue is very complex and somehow integrate that concept
Mhm.
into these concerns.
Can you say that at the outset?
Right. Yeah, good point. At the very beginning. Or maybe we're gonna recommend it later.
So keep us moving. And then we broke down the recommendations into like 2 slides towards the end. Again, we'll condense this further and use it as talking points. For now, we just wanted to get the concept up. So this is the first one. And then here's the second one where we touch on the idea of the consultant, and just some of the primary ideologies that we follow within the city in terms of evidence-based policing, fair and impartial, and so forth.
So maybe that paragraph is where to insert the concept of complexity. And that's why it needs to be deferred at the very least. Because the policies are very similar across jurisdictions, I'm thinking these are lexical policies. And therefore, lexical touts itself on making sure that they're in line with, the minimum state and federal guidance. So I don't know whether this is something we need to hire the consultant for.
What? I would say like in the state audit, they talk about the need to define the audit program. What we have in these policies is we're gonna review 10 instances of accessing, 10 access to the APLR data. We're gonna review 10. That's the total description of the audit. It's a review of 10 instances, okay? And we know from the audit that the ALPRs themselves will generate millions of images. So they're technically looking at 10. So that right there is very problematic. Then in one place it says biannually, and in another place it says biannually. So whoever is doing this, it needs a much more careful review. One's an audit every 6 months and one is an audit every 2 years.
Right.
And looking at 10 use cases. So I think there are.
So maybe we should include in this, not just consistent with state and federal guidance, but also.
Well, I mean, like state laws and CJIS guidance. If you read the audit, it's all in there. Like what? So I don't know who's doing these policies, but the audit found issue with Marine. Every single jurisdiction it looked at, presumably they're all using the same policies.
Los Angeles didn't even have a policy,
Right.
So, yeah.
Other than that one.
Okay.
Is this it?
Yeah, for now. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, maybe we can have a little conversation about process because I'm not sure who all was giving input on the drafts of the items and to what extent they were. I know I was. And a lot of my edits are not in the document. And the reason that concerns me to some extent is we have things in here that I think are not useful. I made this point repeatedly. For example, the top 10 law enforcement agencies reporting vehicle theft recoveries. I don't know why this is useful to say the California Highway Patrol uses ALPR technology and they recover more vehicles than any other agency in the state. Because as I said, this is a statewide agency. So what would one expect? It's not a surprise that LA is number 2, the biggest city in our state by far. So so I'm a little concerned about process. And I say that to say on the policy section, I also asked you to go back and look specifically at the feedback I provided. I know Kitty did, I'm not sure about others, because we're very weak in this section about what our concerns are. And I think if we actually want the council to pay attention, we can't say things like drafting errors, although biannual and annual is a drafting error that has a substantive impact. But I think we need to give specific examples of the policy concern, and that needs to be in this document, like bullet pointed out. So this is comment on the presentation, but it's also comment on the report, like for next time, our process. And this was rushed, and it was hard, and we had the Brown Act issue, so I want to acknowledge all of that. But I do think it needs to be tighter for next time. And for this, I think if we're doing a presentation to council, it's time to put the specifics in the presentation about what the concerns are on the policy side in particular.
What would you like to add? What do you think will give it the weight that you're looking for?
Well, I know, for example, because you have issues that now they've changed, like, if practicable, they changed it to like practical in terms of whether or not there's a huge problem with whether or not the ALPR hit data has to be validated in collects. And in some places it says if practical, and then later it says it must be in the same section of a policy. So even if I'm an officer, if I'm in the police officers union, I'm gonna have a problem with this policy, what am I supposed to follow? So that's an example. The biannual and biennial is a great example. I think, Kitty, you had a few examples in the thing that we've included. So I think we could go through them, but we'd be happy to take a quick break and help us pull them up. And I believe, Julie, you had.
I had comments.
So, and maybe find like 3 or 4 that we think are very compelling to include. Those are a couple that come to mind right now.
Yeah, I don't
So-
know that we can do it
I don't think.
during a break, but I think we can now talk about.
Right.
So what we'll say is, for example, among the many problems. And then
Let me also anecdotal examples.
the ones that you just mentioned, Leah, and
How about that, the fact that the draft is not limited to California law enforcement? It's
Didn't they do that in this like?
no,
They
they
did it
did
one
not,
time.
they did not do it consistently, so
Throughout the document.
the drafting errors are very significant, I think, because, and they reflect that this was done in haste. Because that's important to say that it has to be limited to California law enforcement and not to say that just once, one point in the policy.
Yeah, I mean, I think those examples, the biannual, they speak to the need to more time to finalize the policy, even if you're getting a copy of it, forget about a consultant. Making sure it references California throughout. I think it's very sloppy. So,
Are those examples, do you guys feel comfortable with adding these to the slides?
I think the problem I'm having right now, I emailed staff. And I was looking through the 1100 page PDF that is the council packet, the original one, finding our stuff like beginning on 850. And there's like 4 different versions of the policies in there. Nowhere is it clear like what council's actually being asked to approve. Thank you for sending the link.
and it's not clear what our responses were to, because it includes some of our responses to the first draft, which are no longer relevant, the second draft.
And I don't know if anywhere they're making it clear. I guess they know that it's this and the supplemental packet is what council is being asked to approve. And I'm assuming that is the case. So the reason I'm hedging here is I haven't read this super carefully to see that all of these are still in here. Because I was reading yesterday the last version of the policy in the 1100 page PDF, which I don't know if it's the same as it. Do you guys?
As a supplemental one. We, at least I haven't personally compared the 2 policies, but it's my understanding that supplemental one, which is the link that I shared too, and we do have physical copies for the members of the public, is the most up-to-date and revised policy that council will be voting on, and that's where our report's included as well.
Okay, so yeah, I would give an example, section 1305.3 of the surveillance use policy. This is this issue they changed, if practicable to if feasible. I don't think that improved clarity in that section, and there's no definition of what that means. Again, if I'm an officer, I'd be concerned about this as well. It's not just.
Also, that's a section that says should, where it should say shall.
Yeah.
Right, that was another thing, a very significant drafting. error.
Consistent.
Yeah,
So maybe under our drafting errors, we can just have some bullet points of these examples because they matter. And it's not just like.
Material drafting.
Material
errors.
drafting.
I think that's what you're building out right now.
Yeah.
Jose's on it, he's building that out right now. Is there any other additions or edits or comments?
And that's a concern for the officer who
concerns.
has to implement this.
Right.
You want to provide any
I
other
think
notes
another
to staff?
comment is, this goes directly to the state audit report. In terms of data sharing with other agencies, again, I'm assuming this hasn't changed in this version. This, and this is in the policy, I think. Okay, forgive me, document, what document we're talking about. Yes, I think this is, there's gonna be letters between other law enforcement agencies and each time someone wants to access. What is recommended in that state audit is MOUs between the city of Berkeley and anyone that would have data sharing, and that there is public visibility. So it's not like a one-off, like I could give data to any of the thousands of policing jurisdictions in the United States, but we have MOUs and they govern the nature of the data sharing relationship, what is going to be provided and what's not, etc. The purpose of a reasonable purpose for wanting data, all of that. So this is an area 1305.10, I think, third-party data sharing. That needs beefing up.
And that's the guiding policy. I know Berkeley, the police would like to do a letter campaign or letter share with every time someone requests footage.
Which simply says that we will abide by Berkeley's policies.
But what we're saying here, if I'm correct, is that's not standard operating procedure or protocol, and that mostly it's MOUs that would govern between.
I don't think it's mostly, it's what is
It's what-
recommended by the California State Auditor. And also in that audit report, it says that the training needs to be specified 1305.11, and throughout these documents, they say there's going to be training, but we never see what the training is. So I think anywhere as well where we can cite like a state audit, it's not old, of several different jurisdictions in California, it calls out these issues and the issues are not resolved in the policies. That's why I end up with flexible. I think it is flexible. It says it in the footnote, but that's kind of neither here nor there to me because the issues are still manifest that you see in the state audit.
I would also note at some point, I mean, I don't know whether it's worth noting on the slide, but the presenter, you know, we've made a lot of the fact that we don't want law enforcement agencies from outside of California, especially Texas and other states that have laws outlawed abortion access. But it's also worth noting that all four of the jurisdictions that the auditor looked at, and it wasn't because they chose them for problems. They looked at four in various regions across the United States, and all four of them had problems with their safeguards and with their policies. So we would be data sharing with these other jurisdictions that have been called out for problematic policies or behavior. And that's worth noting somewhere. It's not just outside California.
Okay, I'm gonna wrap this up. Is there anything else that we would like to comment on this presentation? Then we can discuss about who's giving it and how.
Well, yeah, sorry, I actually want to wrap it up, but I do think we need some section that does take on some of the issues in the budget referral, the referrals, some of the issues that are cited as the basis for wanting this, because even in my own council district newsletter on this, I think you and I are both in District 7, District 6. You know, there's a talk about like my friends are getting mugged. And 52 fixed ALPR readers, unless you're getting mugged in front of it. Well, actually, you're getting mugged walking down the street. The ALPR readers can do nothing about this. I'm just not sure. So it's like a lot of anecdotal things and we're very worried about crime. And I think all of us are concerned about crime. But does this technology solve the problems that have been identified? So if we should have at least like 1 or 2 slides, say like, this is the ostensible basis for why we would be doing this. And that's something about the data. That's why I keep coming back to like, what is our vehicle rate? Because we keep talking about how it's grown, but is it really high? Is it higher than these places with the ALPR technology? I don't know.
That also reminds me that we don't talk about one of our objections in our letter, and I think there seems to be a bit of a disconnect between the letter that we sent out in these slides. I don't think the slides reflect all the points that were made in the letter. And one of them was about the placement of the cameras, and I don't think that got in here either, that it was left up to the vendor in the policy, and that our recommendation was that the city council be involved in that. So that's just another important issue, and I guess I just feel like the slides, they're a little too long and they don't reflect a lot of the serious concerns with specificity that would be helpful.
So that could be on the slide about concerns, maybe condense the one about alternatives and add a few concerns, one of them being that. So the first draft of these policies said that the vendor would decide the location. We had concerns about that, and then it was changed to the vendor would have input. But I think we should make it clear that we believe city council should make the decision, and that should be clear. And I think that that's something the city council would.
But wouldn't that be in something that we would give for recommendations if we're gonna put that on here?
Well, I think it could also be under the slide about concerns.
I do understand that, but when and I do believe I'm gonna be presenting, and if I am presenting, I'm gonna rely on these slides as anchors, not as sales. I'm not going to read off them. I'm gonna use them to keep the conversation moving, as it were. So I do hear what you're saying, but if I start reading every one of these and we start getting into citations and, you know, getting very, very detailed, we're gonna lose the audience.
But I think there's 2 issues about location. One is city council should have make the decision. And the other is that we've heard a lot of community concern about the disparate impact of the location. So there are those 2. So I do think we ought to mention location.
I agree, and you are preaching to the converter. That is definitely an issue that I believe. Director.
If I may, we do make a note about the locations under the slide of the acquisition report. But we don't have the 2 points as you just articulated, but we make a point that there is a concern about the potential installation location.
I see.
And another thing I don't remember seeing there is this whole issue of metrics, which is really important, because if you're going to do it, city council, and you're going to do it for this 2-year period, on what basis are you going to assess this success and effectiveness? If we're not even targeting particular crimes, and even in the response here, it's kind of like, well, you can't, it's part of a holistic, comprehensive thing. You can't really measure it. So they're effectively agreeing to build something into the baseline budget, saying we have, we really aren't going to be able to measure it, but we should just do it.
If I may, that point's also on the same slide, so it's slide 10. So it may be, as you all noted, some of these things are getting lost. So slide 10, it talks about past concerns regarding the acquisition report. So point number 1, surveillance report lacks a list of potential installation. Number 2, concerns were raised regarding the estimated cost. Number 3, there's a lack of metrics for assessing impact and implementing mitigation measures. And 4, the absence of thoroughly evaluated alternatives.
Okay.
Thank you, Director. And with that, I really am gonna wrap this up because we do have some other stuff we want to talk about. Board Member Wilson, you want to get the last comment on this?
No, other than I do want to at some point have a process conversation. As I said, there were a lot of edits that were provided that didn't make it into the document. So
Sounds good.
I think I know it's technically a transition. But our attempt for item number 6 is actually to initiate that conversation,
Okay,
so that we could start touching on those points. So we'll hold those thoughts.
Which takes us to the discussion on the latest reporting concerning the independent investigation to the.
But so I thought we were gonna discuss, is this something you wanna do, Chair?
I think it's important that I do, yes. Is that okay with you?
It's okay.
All right.
Yeah, I was just wondering if a new face.
Yeah, it's gonna be mine.
Okay,
All right. But I do appreciate so many times that you have done it, Kitty. Thank you.
no, I wasn't calling for that.
Oh, I know you. In all fairness, board member, Calvita called me to make sure I was going to do it, so. And I think it's important. So that being said, discussion on the latest reporting concerning the independent investigation into the allegations against the BPD's downtown task force biking. Rachel, do you want to start this conversation?
Sure.
Yeah.
But,
Yes.
so at the last regular meeting, just for context, the board indicated, that the independent investigators report, on the allegations brought forth by a former BPD officer, Shadowdy, those, that investigative report had been submitted to the city manager's office. We were, in conversation and we're trying to get some more clarity yet about the board's access to that report. Since then, the city, put out a summary of, the investigative process. And this is a memo that was produced by, Swanson and McNamara, which were the independent investigators. In the memo, they provided some bullet points regarding the investigative process. Subsequently, there was statements made by the city spokesperson that provided some characterizations about the investigative report. And it created somewhat of, I think, confusion for community members, certainly for the board members. The subcommittee who had been involved in and still involved in the policy review process. I have since spoken with the city manager, the deputy city manager, and she has informed me that the statements from the spokesperson were premature. They were not consistent with what the city strategy was going to be at this point, which was just to simply put out that summary of investigative process. So it's my understanding that there probably won't be further statements made by the city manager, but that I will leave that up to them. We have since put out a subsequent statement in collaboration with the chair that addressed some of those statements made by the spokesperson, specifically that some of the conclusions as they were represented, they don't seem to align with what the scope of the independent investigators process was. So we made sure that we made statements to that regard. And we also have here some of a presentation of some of the allegations that brought forth by the former officer. I do want to say too, though, just to emphasize, part of the memo from the independent investigator provided, I think, a really important point for the community. These no longer are alleged text messages. They were forensically authenticated, which means that they did retrieve the device or one of the devices where the messages were stored, and they were able to confirm that they were in fact sent. So it is not, we're no longer talking about allegations of text messages. We're still investigating, and through the policy review process, we're still looking at policies that need to be improved out of what occurred in that bike unit. Mr. Chair, is that?
Oh, that's fair. Yes. tread carefully. Director, we can discuss anything that has been made public, correct?
We can discuss the reporting of, that's been provided subsequent to that summary. So that is not part of the public domain.
And everyone on the board is caught up with the situation as is. Wanted to make sure.
Did you have something you wanted to ask?
Well, I will, but not at this time. I'm gonna let them. Unless, is this a good time for us to get to go in?
Yeah, the rest of this PowerPoint is just.
Okay, perfect.
Messages.
Perfect. So yes, this was a great concern. We, again, as a body, independent oversight or quasi-independent oversight body that is supposed to provide transparency and accountability with its oversight, you know, we were stressed by the city attorney's office, who I want to make a note is not present this evening.
Actually, sorry for. They joined in a little late, but if we need a deputy city attorney Chang,
Okay.
he is in the chat.
Great to hear.
Right.
That, you know, the confidential information that we are privy to is sacrosanct, and as a board, we have, in the 2 years that I have been here, have upheld that. And for the information to be leaked through the city manager's office and other you know, bodies, that they had more information than this body and still does, is not appropriate. And we have to find a way that this works, that we're once again, I'm going to ask that we ask the city manager, when there are statements provided, that we are in their information loop. I'm also going to ask that we have another conversation about sitting down, and the confidentiality on all sides has to be preserved in these processes. And that also being said, now that the findings have been made public, I want to make sure that I am clear in my disappointment about what our definitions of racism and biases are in our community. And that's all I can say carefully about this at this point. I look forward to working with all stakeholders to find a way that we resolve not only this situation, but for us to come to the table in a meaningful way to get the work done. And that being said, you know, there was a response to the first article written by Councilmember Kate Harrison. I have, if you're ready, I've included that in your packet. And I wanted to make sure it was part of the record here this evening.
Is that, you said there was a response to Councilmember Harrison's statement? Is that what you said?
That's not what I said. I said that this is Councilmember Harrison's response to the Berkeley side article.
Got it.
I guess I don't have to read into the, do I have to, or is this?
If you want, it's up to you. We can read it. You want us to read it?
Yes, please.
Okay. The email from Councilmember Harrison dated the Thursday, July 20th, 2023 at 5:20. And it was provided to Berkeley Side Reporter. Its subject line is response to your article, hope you focus. I am extremely troubled that the city manager's office, who is in charge of the very police department under scrutiny, is releasing details from the independent investigation by telling the media that there were no arrest quotas nor departmental practices of racial bias. The city's public information officer, who works for the city manager, told the media definitively that the department does not have a practice of racial bias, and the department does not have any arrest quotas. In addition to the disturbing release of confidential information, these statements draw a conclusion that extends far beyond the scope of the investigation into the bike patrol during a narrow period of October 1st, 2019 through November 22nd, 2020. The public information officer indicated that the one-page summary of the investigatory process, but not conclusions, were all that could be released publicly, but then drew these sweeping conclusions. It is a breach of protocol and undemocratic to keep the investigation confidential while simultaneously releasing drips of information without context to absolve the department and management. This behavior breeds further mistrust about government and the independent nature of the investigation. Kay Harrison, Berkeley City Council.
Thank you, Director.
Can I just ask our city attorney on the line, what the current status is of the Police Accountability Board receiving the full report, some redacted version thereof?
So we have had some discussions with the director about that and had asked the director to communicate with the board. I'm not in position to discuss in a public session further, but we have provided information to the director, and I'll refer you back to him. And I'm also happy to speak with you after the meeting.
Okay, what is confidential about a process or a time for us receiving the information?
So I just want to be very careful about what I can say about issues relating to the investigation in a public open session. And if you'll if you'll indulge me again, I'd be happy to speak with you, and our office would be happy to speak with you individually. And we have apprised the director of the status of those issues previously, and we had asked the director to communicate that to all the board members.
Okay, I don't want to suggest that he has not. I guess what I'm saying is to sort of reinforce our chair's message. If we're an accountability and oversight board, we cannot do our job if we don't have the information. What we did receive that I reviewed in that Dropbox was like some random documents that did not facilitate our oversight of anything, nor in understanding of what this investigator, how the conclusions that were reached, at least by the city manager's office, were developed. So they were pretty useless, I think, from an oversight perspective. And that's all we've received to date. So I'm very concerned. And I guess I'd ask this group then, we do believe that we should see this report. I think I speak for all of us, with appropriate redactions, if there are any, based on who we are as the oversight board. And so what recourse do we have if we continue to not receive the report? Is it to subpoena the document for our charter? Is that our only recourse?
At this time, that would be our only recourse.
And are we prepared as a group to say, if we don't receive the report, some version of the report by X date, then we will agendize in open or closed session as appropriate, issuing a subpoena for the report?
I would be comfortable with that. And I'd also say, because this board is so new and we are developing precedent and creating the standards and procedures and protocols, it is important that we do this correctly from the very beginning. And I think that we should work for access as a full board. That's my opinion.
I think one action we can take tonight. And I agree that should be agendized for a future meeting. But I would propose tonight that we send a letter to council in which we express our concern about the statements that the city spokesperson has put out, stating that it's not department policy to discriminate by race, those various things, which were not anyway the investigators' purpose to determine that. But I think that we ought to send a letter to council as the accountability board expressing our concern that this has been put out there purporting to be the findings of this investigation at a time when the findings were to be so confidential that not even the police accountability board could have access to it. And then say that given that this confidentiality has been breached, it would seem appropriate for the public, and certainly the police accountability board, but the public as well, to get a redacted version. There's nothing confidential about a redacted version. Government does this all the time when they produce.
Well, I'm hoping there was a redacted version because the information officer had details that only someone who had seen the report would have.
Right.
So
But I
that
do-
in itself tells me that there's been details of this report that have been let out beyond through the proper channels.
So I would make a motion that we send a letter to council expressing these three things. One, our extreme disappointment with the city spokesperson's statement purporting to represent the findings of the confidential investigation. And two, that given that that confidentiality has been breached to that extent, that the public should have access to a redacted version. And three, that in all cases, in any case, the police accountability board, as the oversight board of the city, should have access to at least the redacted version of the report. The full police accountability board, not just the subcommittee. And I would move that we send that letter to all members of council with a CC to the city manager.
I would second that motion.
Okay. I will proceed to a roll call vote. Chair Moore,
Yes.
Board Member Calavita,
Yes.
Board Member Leftwich,
Yes.
and Board Member Wilson.
Can I ask one question? Did the subcommittee meet with the CAO's office on July 20th? Talk about this?
Yes.
And, okay. All right,
That,
so you guys have more information about when we're getting, or no?
No.
no,
All right,
absolutely not.
okay.
But let me also say that I've included the text messages that were up for interpretation of racial bias and racism. And can I lean on, and please forgive me, but can I lean on your legal expertise? I remember through my short stint in law school, there was a Supreme Court justice who said, I can't define pornography, but I know it when I see it. I'd like you guys to use the same measuring test for these text messages. And I'm not gonna read them all out loud, but I would definitely feel like if we were to use the same test with some of this, that there is no doubt in my mind, in my experience, my background, I would say that these go beyond the pale. And that's why I added them to the packet this night, so they could be part of this conversation in a meaningful way. Because you might not be able to define it, But you know, you see.
Did you send this entire packet to us electronically or is it
Mhm.
posted? Okay. just look
Should
at
also
that.
be
I only
posted
got
online.
Three pages. It must be me. I'll go online for it. I don't get a copy of it.
I didn't receive it either.
No,
I received the agenda, but I don't think I received the entire package.
no.
You have the,
So what's posted online is only 3 pages too.
It's interesting because I printed these out from that link.
Oh, well, no, I'm wrong. That's the agenda. Yeah,
Scared for a second.
okay. All right, so.
A little sweat over here, a little sweat.
Sorry, go ahead.
That was actually all the points that I wanted to make, but I wanted to stress these. This situation, hopefully we'll never have one again like this. But if we do, I want to make sure that we have the infrastructure and the ability to navigate through it. And we do it correctly the first time. So there won't be any way to skirt best practices. We start with best practices.
Just let me know how you.
You know what, I was gonna read them, and in the interest of time and my blood pressure, I'm gonna say we shouldn't.
Okay.
And that they are all included in the packet, please feel free. All right. Back into this agenda. Actually, can we agendize for our next meeting in September to have a closed session to talk with the city attorney's office?
regard any particular topic?
I mean, we can take our picks here. I mean, it's a,
If they'll allow it, they have often refused our requests for closed session because they're only specific grounds, so.
if we have to make one, I have a few. But I think it's important for the sake of clarity and for what the board needs, that they speak directly to the city attorney's office. All the director can only provide so much insight into the thinking of the city attorney's office. If you provide the advice, I'd like you guys to come down and work with us on it. And that's what stakeholders do. James, I'm committed to working this out, and we'll find a way.
But if we need some specific topics, like a status update on negotiations with BPA over, I'm gonna get the name wrong, but
The regulation.
the regulation, so that's one thing. Status update on release of the downtown bike task force report, discussion of the letter or memorandum we received from the city attorney's office outlining the city attorney's position on conflict of interest and vis-a-vis the police accountability board. So those would be 3 topics. Essentially.
Which takes us into.
Exactly. Which takes us into agenda item number 6, which is discussion on proposed agenda items and priorities after our 1-month break. Looking so much forward to it.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, go. Sorry, I was just going to know, we included a list on page 56. These are just some of the more recent items. We know since we published this one, some of them have shifted a bit in priority. And I know that there's some that didn't immediately make it on the list. But we just kind of wanted to take this time to hear about the ways that you all wanted to structure some of these conversations, as well as getting any additional items, and we could kind of schedule them out and so we could hit the ground running once we're back.
Love it.
So.
Director.
Sure. If you look at 56 or page 56, as Mr. Molina just mentioned, I just wanted to acknowledge board member Wilson's commentary. I know that we weren't trying to conflate the 2 different points, but we do concur that is important for us to discuss a process in the drafting. We just want to say from the office, we're not trying to leave out any commentary. But the sausage making of these reports can get a little complicated, trying to represent everybody's points and doing it offline with the Brown Act restrictions. So it is, just want to emphasize, it's not our intent from the office to silence or hush any board members' points. It's a very tricky process doing that offline. And again, it is for future discussion, but just, and I'll could talk about it more, but in Fairfax County, where I served as a panel member, we assigned liaisons that started the drafting process. Those two worked offline and then shared it with the regular board. So at least the staff was a little bit removed from the process, and the board members or panel members themselves were giving life to the report itself. Because we definitely don't want to conflict with anything that you're saying. We're trying to represent it the best we understand.
Okay, you mean that, board members wrote the initial drafts?
We assigned liaisons in our process, right? They started, and then we were able to, and again, this will probably be a discussion too with the city attorneys, making sure that we do it legally, in line with what is allowed here in California. But we started the process with two because it was less of a quorum, and then we were able to send around the comments. But the initial draft was from the panel members themselves, so not from the staff.
I think we talked about that before. I know just for me, given my work and my day job, I cannot do that. Like, I really do need staff to do that.
Right.
I think we need more time. Obviously, we didn't have time this time. But where we can build in a calendar, and there are things that we know are going to come, like these surveillance acquisition reports, whatnot, and the budget. I think we're supposed to be reviewing this firm's budget. We kind of know generally. If we work backwards, we can have a draft come to a meeting, and then everybody's feedback is there. We can all see one another's edits.
Can we do that in a document? Is that allowed with the charter and with law? Are we allowed to?
Are we allowed to
Yes,
work on a
or-
document during a board meeting?
No, like online. not
Oh, no.
Yeah, that
Well,
might be tricky.
It gets sticky if the idea is like a Google Drive document and everybody kind of works on it because of the idea of responding to each other. So
I
that's.
thought board member Wilson was saying that if we have enough.
She is, that was
notes-
my
Oh,
own
okay.
idea. I just
Okay.
do that out there.
Mhm.
But one potential meeting, middle ground could be that staff, give a purely, preliminary research report that the board can then utilize to, take its position. So we will try to do all the fact finding research, and then you can then craft out. So that way you don't have to engage in the research. Like you mentioned, you all have different activities beyond your responsibilities here, but we can do the heavy lift of that initial research and then to help you hone in on your position for the report itself. Just an idea, but again, we don't have to get into the logistics, but this is previewing what the discussion is going to look like after the vote.
I think the annual report is in fact the ODPA annual report rather than PAB. So it comes, the annual report comes from that's the office's annual report. At least it was in the past.
Yeah, well, in the past, it was PRCs or one entity,
Right.
but the language is that the office drafts a report, gets the legal review, and then the board approves it to go to city council. So there is that interplay between both of our entities.
And it's presented as the PAB report or as the ODPA report.
Do you know that answer off the top of your head, or?
The way that it's written, it contemplates both of our bodies as being like one. So I think at least the way that we wrote it here was really for note-taking purposes, and we could specify.
Sorry, and I'm looking at the charter language. So it's in 16B, it says, the director of police accountability shall prepare an annual report to the public, included but not to the following. But then in 16C, it says, this annual report shall be presented to the board for approval. So it is the director of police accountability that prepares it and then submits it to the board for approval. So
I think it's something we would want to be involved in, right? We talked about the need for this additional communication staffing, the need to have more engagement with the community. You guys did the great sort of forum or town hall regarding the ALPRs, but needing to do more of that. An annual report, if done right, it's a great communications vehicle. So
I don't disagree, and I just want to give you an update. I have submitted to city attorney for the initial legal review, so the idea is as soon as we can get it back to ensure that it has a legal compliance and then get presented to you. I would love to be able to present it at our return meeting, so.
Excellent.
And I think it'd be nice if we could, if we as a board have some suggestions or edits to then have come back to us again. Depending on what they're.
Yeah, well, you have to approve it, so yeah, they contemplate that. Process.
so when we do come back, could you all have some kind of calendar that roughly shows, like in this month, we might expect to look at a budget and have to produce some report or analysis or something. And this month we would get this kind of acquisition report. Just something so we could roughly like try to map out our workflow.
If you could add cases to that, with how many days are in and out, that would be great.
If I may, just some clarification, budget, are you talking about the police budget or the office?
I thought we were supposed to be reviewing the police budget.
You have authority to do this. I don't think it's a mandate, but you have the authority for sure.
I think it's something we should,
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with you.
and I don't know what time of the year that's typically presented. I think it's on the state fiscal year, city fiscal,
Yeah,
July to June or county.
right, we just finished, well, they do a 2-year budget cycle, so we're going to start the discussions for the next 2 years coming up in November. I think the process starts.
Okay, well, anyway, I think this would be helpful.
If we're talking about the agenda for September, I would just like to reiterate that during our closed session a month or two ago about the status of the regulations, we had asked the city attorney's office to provide a list of items over which the union had expressed concern, and we haven't received that. And I don't know.
Yeah, I know if I could just, I just want to apologize to the board for the delay in that. We've been working on that. It's in a very advanced state. Some of the issues that we looked at turned out to be a bit more complex than we'd initially thought when we first reviewed it. And so it required some additional consultation. That will be back to you soon with plenty of time to review before the September meetings. And then we'll follow up with more guidance on next steps in the labor negotiation process. And I just want to apologize again for that delay.
Is there any-
That ties into the closed session item we talked about, right? In resolution. So I think that the metrics discussion is great, and hopefully we can have that, but also when we talk about the annual report. So we don't have any in there this time, maybe for next time.
Well, why don't we roll into that right now, discussion on the metrics. Have you guys proposed anything as an office on how you would like to, I guess, present the data?
Sure, present the data performance metrics for that.
Yeah, I mean, to us, like, or how you would explain it to the community.
Yeah, so I did one of my proposals. So when I got hired, there was language in my agreement with the city that we would co-produce, me and the city council, an evaluation for my role. I submitted some recommendations, and one of the things that I talked in there is to co-produce a evaluation metric, not only for the office, but for the board. And I think it's within line with the spirit of collaboration, transparency. So I have particular metrics that I have in mind based on my experience in the field, But I would love for the board, the community to be involved in giving us some recommendations about what they would like to see. What is a successful path? What is a successful DPA? So I think that, we want to make sure that they're included in that process. But I do have some specific metrics I think that are kind of baseline. I do also want to plug in our investigator, who's also a NACO board member. He's going to be a part of a panel group at this NACO where they're doing a presentation titled Oversight Outcomes. So they actually just sent out a call for some seeking advice, solicitation from the colleagues in the field. And they're looking at measures, what different agencies are using to measure their work. And just to give you an example, number of arrests for resisting dismissed by prosecutor by court, number of searches excluded by courts, number of complaints in relation to call for service, on due activities. And so they have a list of things that they're going to be doing in a presentation that may or may not be applicable to our community. But I think that there is also a broader critique about our field, that we don't do a good job articulating what our metrics are and how do we exactly communicate to the community that we're doing our work. The police have relatively defined metrics, and they have arrest numbers, they have convictions, but what does success or what do metrics look like in our field? And that's an ongoing discussion within our field.
I would think that we might want to include in that obstacles of attaining our goals. And so we may have certain goals, but what obstacles stand in the way? Stand in our way.
I think one of the things I would just caution again, don't want to get ahead of that conversation, but because it get really sticky is sustained rates and that being utilized as a metric of the work we're doing. And I've seen though that can be very divisive in communities, try to interpret whether an oversight agency is effective based on their sustained rates. And in the annual report, we're going to discuss our sustained rates, but is that a true measure of what the work that you're doing? So it's important to know.
Sustained by the department?
Sustained by the oversight agency. That's a metric that's been used, or subcommittee members have utilized that as a metric.
But I guess who's sustaining?
Right. There's us, and then there's the
we
Oversight agencies use that
okay.
as their,
Right.
or their sustain.
Yeah, but who's sustaining the board?
The oversight agency.
Okay.
In other words, how many have we, the PAB, sustained? And it doesn't make any sense to use that as
Okay. Because I was thinking when you're saying sustain, that you meant like the police department
Right.
sustains our
also
recommendation, which is gonna be 0%, right? That obviously wouldn't, I mean, we
That's-
wanna highlight that, that's its own issue.
And that is part of the annual report numbers, and not quite zero, but it's not 100%.
So, that being said, is there anything else you want to comment on this agenda point? Okay, so that,
excuse me, are we gonna have usual subcommittee? Because I would like us to talk about the conflict of interest issue, and I know we proposing that we can talk about that in a closed session, but again, we've made requests like that in the past, and we have not been allowed to have those discussions in closed session. So I just think we need to talk about it one way or another.
and that's usually part of boilerplate template for every agenda.
Right, I just wanted to be sure that was.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think these are just more for like our new
Additional.
business,
Okay.
right?
For
Just to
what?
give for the new business section in our agenda,
Right.
just items we'll be addressing beyond our
Right.
usual reporting.
Can we put on for September 13th, the meetings for the 27th and 11th of October? I will just want to ask if you guys would be willing to entertain date changes, or at least tell you that I'm gonna miss both of those.
when is the NACO conference in Chicago?
November.
The first week of November.
I believe it's the 10th or 11th to 16th.
Yeah, 12 to the 16th of November.
I was off by 10.
Is that something we are supposed to go to, funded to go to?
If you have an interest, please let me know and we'll try to work out. I know that the chair has provided his commitment to try to get as many board members, and if we want to go, we have to make that work. Today I just had a discussion about the potential new location, so we're gonna have to be very careful with our monies. So we need to know stat, if board members interested in it.
And there might be some members of the Berkeley Police Department that'll be joining us. I heard that.
That's my understanding.
That's excellent. That's something to report on, just saying, of course. Do we want to do a status report on the pending policy complaints?
I think again, we know there's a few that the board has recently opened, and there's been a lot that's happened between the times that we've received these complaints, these policy review complaints. So we just kind of wanted to put that on the board's radar to say like, hey, we haven't pushed these to the side. We've been working on them. We've just, again, need to plan out the way that we present those to you. So we just want, again, give you that notice that we are going to be doing that and presenting the available information we have on those.
Any follow-up questions from board members?
Do we have anywhere on our website where we share what the pending inventory is? Obviously, I know we didn't say names of officer complaints, but like policy complaints pending.
On our current website, we don't. One is just a limitation of the current website structure. But Director, I'm not sure if you want to talk more on this point.
Yeah, and I haven't agendized this particular topic because I've been working behind the scenes. There's a software that I've been in trying to procure for the office and the board. It serves as both case management and a data representation. It's a portal site to it, so we could in real time give us the complaints that we're receiving, both policy and misconduct complaints, and we'll have that publicly available. So historically, we have not been providing that information, but I've been working with the procurement team, the budget team. There's city attorney is currently reviewing a contract that we're looking with the vendor. So hopefully by September, I'll have an update and I'll be able to walk you through that site and what it is.
Awesome. So that would put us really at agenda item 5, unless there's an update you want to give about new policy. I think we did something, right?
Right.
I
Sorry.
think we just did 6.
Yeah, we're on 6.
Can
Technically.
I just wanted to add, I wanted to add something. I was waiting for you to finish this list. I want to add that my priorities for September are to meet as a subcommittee on very partial policing, which we've not managed to do, and to write a report. Local 2, parallel to the chief's report on implementation, and we would write our own report based on those meetings that we will be having in September. And the other thing is the downtown passport policy review based on the texts and allegations. And so I'm chairing that subcommittee, and I'm expecting that also to happen in September. So those two big things.
No.
Hoping to finalize.
And one more thing, I'd also like to go ahead and remind council formally within a letter that we still need our seats filled here. And that is going to get very busy after break. Love to get this to be a full board. It's the other reason I try to be so quick. Only half of us. Imagine when there's 10.
Okay.
Go ahead. Let's right.
And then if there's any other items that might not come up now or didn't come up now, just feel free to send us an email and we could discuss that and help coordinate that.
Are you still working? I'm sorry, I lost track on scheduling it there in Rachel.
Yes, we were working on that. It's been incredibly difficult for whatever reason, with everyone's complex schedules. But it's still on the priority list to make sure we get that in September for sure.
So that takes us to agenda item number 7. That is public comment.
Okay. With that being said, are there any members of the public who are physically present that would like to provide some form of public comment? Okay, so hearing none. I'll move on to our virtual attendees. George Littman, you have been granted permission to speak.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm left with a lot of questions, specifically about the downtown task bike team investigations. I just feel like we're sort of kicked in the head, and I'll just say I can think of like 5 different things that are eating at me. First of all, I really appreciate the professionalism of the board and staff in this meeting. I think that I'm finding it hard to be as controlled as you are, as professional, but I'm going to try to say the specific things that I'm concerned about. One question is, I guess, where does this leave the PAB? I feel like this is another in a long trail of abuses that you're subject to. And I don't like to be a doomsayer, but it's looking a bit grim for you to fulfill your mission. And you've got I don't know if you're still being sued by the police association. You've got you're undermined by the city manager, and you're gone around by the city council. And then when it comes to getting advice from the city attorney, everything seems to take forever. And so that's a whole topic. But I see the letter of concern to the council. I see the closed sessions, and these are positive things. The subpoenas, good idea. I mean, that's a bold step. I think that, let me just skip to the thing about the independent counsel. One thing I don't understand is, are you disallowed from engaging an outside attorney unless the city attorney says it's okay? Only in case of getting a paid attorney, or are you allowed to get a pro bono attorney? I'm going to plead with you for a little bit more time, because I've got to get a couple other points out. And that, I think, is something that you need to find out, because there are public service attorneys who would help. You're going to need that if you're going to talk about suing the city or serving a process on another part of the city. You really can't do that without getting some good outside advice. The question about the report and not being able to see it is completely, it's beyond absurd. It's insane. Everybody knows that they can redact the names. They always do that. You never see it, but you do see an explanation of what the why they would make the assertions that they're making. I believe that the assertions they're making are what they really believe. They have to be able to give proof of that, and they don't have to give the names or anything that would indicate the names. And I think what would it mean for the PAB to stand up for itself? I think we have to be bold. You, the PAB, the staff, and we in the community. This is tough on you. It's really tough on the community. And frankly, this isn't a one-off. We've been dealing with this with the video violent anti-Black, attacks on Black people by the police department, 5 of them in one stretch of several months. This is not a new thing. The racial disparities have not gotten better in terms of the stops. This is all of a piece, and your investigation, well, let me turn to that. If there's a criticism.
We'll just have you finish that last comment, Mr. Littman. We do have other hands raised.
All right. If there's a criticism, this is not really a criticism of the board, but if there is one I would say the lack of clarity about the goals of the board policy investigation. I've never seen it. I've asked for it. I don't know if there is one. But for example, I would hope that it goes more than just, hey, were policies violated and how should the policies be changed? If they're not going to deal with substantive issues about the culture and the breadth of the problem and the rot in the department beyond one team, and they're just going to say it's not an issue, then I hope that you'll be doing that really deep dive. But I don't know that you are, because I don't know what the scope of your investigation is.
Thank you. Okay. Margaret Smith, you should have permission to speak.
Okay, thank you very much. I would like to support the Police Accountability Board in their stance against the license plate readers. And I'd also like to emphasize that the data that goes into these, into the companies that oversee these readers will be available to all sorts of people across the country. If some young woman comes from Texas to California for any reason, she might be suspected of coming here for medical care or abortion or something, and the data will be available to the people in Texas. And I think that's not something that Berkeley ought to be supporting. The other thing is that I would like to encourage the board to look into the city charter and see whether it's being violated. That's something that should be coming to the attention of the city attorney and other people who are supposed to be enforcing our laws. The third thing I'd like to say is that the Berkeley NAACP has been keeping a record of complaints against the police department for a long time, and they have it available to them for analysis. And I would like to suggest that perhaps somebody in the Police Accountability Board could contact the Berkeley NAACP and see what their records show compared to what the official account was. I really think you're doing a wonderful job, and you have a lot of obstacles to completing your work, and I really hope that you can work through them. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you. Okay, we have one more speaker. Nope. That was not what we wanted to do there. Okay.
Thank you. This is Kit Saganor. Thank you for taking my call. I really just want to add my thanks to what you're doing. I will add to the comment from Margot Smith that one of the issues about keeping data confidential is if you are querying databases for, here's a license plate that was read in Berkeley, is there a problem with this license plate? If you're sending a query out to some other database, then the owners of that database have your information. They might not know what corner or the specifics, but they say, oh, this license plate has been in Berkeley because Berkeley is asking us if this is a license plate that is on the hot list. So the only way you can know if a license plate is on the hot list is if you do some kind of query, unless you yourselves own the hot list. And once you've done a query, then everything you've queried, you've given to the holders of that database. So, that's just the nature of information. So thank you very much again for all the work you do. I greatly, greatly appreciate the steps that you're taking.
Thank you. Sharon, with that, we have no additional hands raised.
That brings us to agenda item number 8. That is adjournment. Looking for a motion.
So moved.
And with that, good evening, everyone.
Records on.